Join Maulana Zahir Ahmed Ragi every Wednesday morning as he unpacks the topic of narcissism and enlightens us on the Islamic perspective of tackling this spiritual sickness. Radio Islam International, bringing you contemporary and pertinent psychological discussions.
رضاه أحب لقاء يظل يجيء إلى.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Radio Islam International. My name is Muhammad Bam and I'll be your host until 10 a.m. inshallah. In studio we have Maulana Zahir Ahmed Ragi. Maulana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We take this opportunity of greeting our listeners on Radio Islam, Radio Ansar, and also all those that are joining us on the Ummahat Instagram page.
So while we are discussing the topic You Are Loved, we are today doing the 5th episode. In our last episode, we described some of the characteristics of toxic people. We also discussed the topic future faking and also the blame game where everything becomes the next person's fault. We also did about giving people the silent treatment and the smear campaign. Thereafter, we discussed about how counseling can help to identify the root causes. However, we mentioned that the person himself needs to seek that help, but some just get help because they are forced to do so. We also discussed about the romanticizing narcissistic traits in men portrayed by different places in today's example, Hollywood and Netflix. And thereafter, we went on to the next topic, which was codependency. We discussed about the traits of a person who's known as a codependent, how very low self-esteem he is, and he lives in a fantasy state of mind to rely on other people for affection. And most codependents don't even know they have this trait, and they go into depression. Thereafter, we were going to start with the next topic, which is an empath. What is an empath?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Maulana, Jazakumullah for that. However, before commencing with our discussion today, I think it's important that I make a clarification. Unfortunately, I say that I received a forwarded message where someone, and I hate to say it, that it's an alim, who intentionally misrepresented our discussion, claiming, unfortunately, that I said in our 3rd episode that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is a narcissist. Na'udhu billah. This is sheer fitna and mischief. And I think there is a need for us to clarify this before it goes, unnecessarily becomes a fitna. The context of our discussion, there was a question that don't all of us have some narcissist traits? And in response, I said, yes, all of us have some of these traits, but the object of our discussion is to be informed of it, and so that we are able to manage it in a way that is beneficial and positive. Now, we then mentioned, because some of these traits of narcissist traits is jealousy, anger, rage, and all of us have that. We then went on to give an example of Hadrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu in our discussion. So I need us just to understand that what we said is that prior to Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu accepting Islam, yes, some of these traits were present in him, and he was still not a Muslim. I mean, he was a disbeliever. He was not endowed with the light of Islam. So he did have some of this rage, revenge, anger, which led him to, on his route, to go and assassinate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we also know in the story what happened to his sister, his brother-in-law. However, we mentioned very clearly that when the light of Islam entered his heart, he became the greatest example of how he used these very traits for the good and benefit of Islam that made him among the greatest leaders in the Islamic history. And that's what we said. In no way did we say, as this person claims, that we said, Na'udhu billah, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is a narcissist. Na'udhu billah, we can never say that. Unfortunately, this is misrepresentation of the facts. And it's an example of a person's contempt for others. It's nothing but arrogance and contempt for people to unjustly demean opinions or denigrate their people's speech. And perhaps this is also another trait of someone who might be a narcissist himself, who did what he did. They love starting fights, provoking intense emotional reactions. So let's just leave it there. I don't want to go too much into it, Morana, but it is just an unfortunate thing that how we sometimes, due to our own weaknesses, misrepresent things to cause unnecessary fitna. Having said that, let's now go on to the more important topic that we need to discuss. An empath. In simple terms, an empath is the complete opposite of a narcissist and someone who has a much stronger, much healthier version of a codependent. Now, we spoke of codependency in our previous discussion. Having empathy is important as it's what makes us as humans. It allows us to form connections and be compassionate with people. And people who are empathic, people who are sympathetic, compassionate, are considered to be special people who often deeply turned into the feelings and emotions of those around him. They tune into the feelings of people around them. Empaths are highly sensitive and they are able to feel the pain of others. A similar situation that they are able to feel the pain of people and share those pains. They make other person's pain their own so that they can comfort and support them. Empaths may even cry if they see someone crying as well. They are very patient, understanding, and they are able to follow their gut instinct. Now, we must mention here that before we are just uncovering and unpacking the various characteristic traits that people have in order for us to, this is just still an introduction to our long discussions that we're going to have. And in order to understand, there is a need for us to understand these various characteristic traits. So, as it often allows them, empaths, to pick on things others may not easily see, they find it easy to communicate with others and make the effort to see from other people's perspectives in a discussion. Empaths are described as those who absorb the world's joys and stresses like an emotional sponge. They can bring a lot of love and care into the world, and they are able to feel deeply things which inspires them to want to fix broken people. They just want to help people. Now, there are certain factors or the reasons why and how people become empaths. Like how we spoke about narcissism, we also need to understand this characteristic trait of certain people, and these are various different traits. And one of the reasons why people become an empath is temperament. Some children have more sensitivity than others and are more spiritual and responsive to people's emotions. Secondly, is genetics. Yes, some forms of sensitivity may be genetically transmitted. So sometimes, if both the parents are empaths, it's highly likely that the child will also become one. A third reason why people become or have this characteristic trait of being a more compassionate, more sympathetic, and who we call empath is trauma. Sometimes childhood neglect or abuse can affect the sensitivity level as an adult. So sometimes living with a depressed parent can also wear down the healthy defenses that a child usually develops. As a result of your upbringing, they don't feel, they don't see by their families, and this increases their need to do more than they should for others. A fourth one, which I will end off with, is supportive parenting. Being raised in a healthy, loving environment by supportive, empathic parents who are attentive, who are sensitive to children. They will nurture and encourage the development of their empathic personalities, identities, boundaries, talents, teaching children when and how to be loving and helpful, when to say no. These will help them grow into healthy adults with appropriate boundaries with others. Now, these are some of the reasons why people develop this characteristic of being an empath. Empaths who haven't healed from past traumas or haven't yet set up healthy protective boundaries always want to help others and become disappointed with themselves when they are unable to. They can become so immersed in trying to find solutions for people's problems. And many of them even go to the extent of neglecting themselves and their own needs until they eventually become burnt out emotionally.
Then the question.
Empaths have a natural tendency to absorb people's negativity, even when it's overwhelming. However, their kindness and concern is not reciprocated. They, if they not, if someone does not acknowledge and see that they are trying to be good, then they become very deeply hurt, and they also then become left empty. And what happens is they rarely tell anyone how they feel, and they keep all those feelings of themselves inside as much as possible. And the reason why they do that is they don't like to create conflicts. Sometimes empaths find solace in isolation. They just like to go into, like, beautiful places, flower gardens. They find comfort in their own home, comfort in their bedrooms. And they are often drawn to the beauty of nature, calming sounds. And sometimes these people just love being alone. Now, this is a huge difference between empaths and codependents and narcissists, who can stand being alone and must always be in the company of people to find praise and validation. Codependents and narcissists, they love that company for recognition, validation, but an empath, many a times, just want to be on their own. They appreciate the peace and get so used to loneliness to the point where they feel anxiety and discomfort when the need to step out of their comfort zone, to connect with others, to make friends. And you will find that many empaths, children love to play with their pets, their imaginary playmates, and some parents might identify with what I'm saying. You will find your child just loves to be on her own or he on his own. They have imaginary playmates. They just want to be with their own toys. And they sometimes become so absorbed in living in their own fantasy for long hours. This makes the easiest children to deal with. They are peaceful with their siblings. Generally, they don't need to be constantly entertained. However, this can turn into a problem, and this is why we're addressing it for our parents. When they are left alone with negative thoughts for long periods of time, and it's important that parents always maintain loving, supportive relationships and communication with their children so that their thoughts don't damage them. And a beautiful example is Yusuf alayhi salatu was salam and Yaqub alayhi salatu was salam. When there was something troubling Yusuf alayhi salatu was salam about his dream, he was able to go to his father, Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam, have this open communication of a small child who is seeing this dream of the sun and the moon and the stars prostrating to him. He was able to speak to his father. There was this communication. And it was a very healthy communication to the extent that the father even told him not to relate the dream. So when you see your child in this environment that we've just discussed, as parents, we need to be observing this, and we need to be able to manage those emotions of our children. Empaths aren't necessarily introverts, and there's a difference. When we spoke about a child being on their own, not necessarily that they are introverts. And some empaths are quite extroverted, but the need and desire to be alone from time to time, to recharge and may be away from people, is many a times a comfort zone for them. And also another thing about empath is they are great listeners. And those in their company always feel comforted. They feel supported. They're usually the first people who are turned for advice. They are generally the first people to be turned for help and counseling. People feel at peace in the presence of an empath, as they have this calming energy which they use to help solve people's problems, overcome negative experiences. An empath will always be there to help people. They are there for others, even if they are busy. And we find narcissists are drawn to empaths because they don't like arguing, they don't like conflicts, they don't like confrontations, which means to a narcissist that if they are more likely to brush issues under the carpet, to preserve their inner peace. However, unlike codependents, most empaths have a very strong sense of self and understand that it is not their duty to change, fix, or continue helping someone who isn't making any effort to help themselves. So, empaths, whilst they have that, they also have an ability to understand where to draw lines.
Mm.
They also understand that the way people respond to them isn't an addiction, it is not an indication of who they are, and that their sense of self isn't defined by others. Empaths know when they deserve better and when they should walk away from people, and are able to create and pursue their own independent paths in life.
Well, then the question comes about, can they be helped?
Okay. Now, empaths, can they be helped?
Mm.
Psychotherapists and counselors, yes, can help troubled empaths. So empaths do get troubled, and they can be helped to set healthy boundaries and guide them to practice self-care exercises so that they can have healthier lifestyles and relationships, because of their kind nature and their gentle temperament. They are much easier to counsel than codependents. Empaths will usually heal a lot faster than codependents once they learn how to better deal with people and protect their own energy. Now, as we are highlighting these characteristics, there may be people that are listening to us or watching might realize that, I might be one that is an empath. And it is necessary for some such people to be able to draw boundaries. And that's where the help comes. This brings us to another category of people, and I'll very, very briefly go into that, is which psychologists and them have, name a supernova empath. Now, we spoke about codependence, we spoke about narcissists, we spoke about empaths, but there is someone that psychologists have also determined as supernova empath. This is someone who has a very high level of intuition, and they can identify someone who is toxic from the first or second meeting and then make a mental note to stay away from such people. They are also known, they also know when to use their own narcissistic traits. And we spoke about that just today in the beginning, that all of us, we do have some narcissistic traits. But a supernova empath knows when to use these traits, such as manipulation in a positive way, to protect themselves and others from toxic people. For example, such a person, a supernova empath, may choose to withhold a lot of empathy and kindness. as a way to get rid of a narcissist in their life. And these are skills that people need to learn in order to enjoy good relationships with people and know how to draw boundaries. As mentioned before, everyone possesses these traits, but some people use them to fulfill evil agendas, whilst others use them in a smart way to survive. And supernova empaths are highly educated about behavioral patterns that are found in people. They are able to identify mental health issues in people, such as depression, so they know exactly how to deal with different people, which makes them powerful. And a narcissist knows that such a person is invincible, especially one who has a strong connection with Allah, and failing to destroy them only to re emphasize the weakness they feel inside as troubled human beings. So, these are some of the things that we spoke of, Morana. Now that there is a clear understanding of who a narcissist is, who are codependents, who are empaths, and according to sociological and psychological studies, I think it would now be good for us to explain how these personalities are perceived from an Islamic perspective and what it means to have these traits. We will also explain, inshallah, as we go along, what Islam suggests as the treatment for narcissism and codependence, seeing that they are both classified as personality disorders. And I'm putting emphasis on the word disorder because some of these traits we have them, but when we are using it in a wrong way, then it becomes a disorder. So, seeing as they are both classified as disorders with no real treatment apart from counseling and one's effort and sincere will to change.
Chima, when we say that a person has these, these some of these traits, and as Marana was mentioning that some of them can be used in a good way to get rid of narcissists. I think another one that might be used, as we mentioned, that normally a narcissist has this trait of ignoring you if you don't fulfill his agenda. Can that be used by an empath also? Like, he sees that this is a narcissist and just give him the silent treatment will make him back away.
Yes, and that is why they are regarded as people who are able to understand people's characteristics better and they know exactly how to deal with them. And, empathy is a beautiful blessing. Only those endowed with this emotional gift can appreciate the marvelness and the pricelessness of it. And even narcissists envy empaths, hence why they want to live off their rich emotional energy. Empathy is the ability to recognize and relate to other people's emotions. It is the ability to not only see another person's point of view, but to be capable of emotionally experiencing it as well. And it is like stepping into someone else's shoes and knowing their emotional state, even if you haven't had that particular experience. And therefore, they are better able to deal with these types of things.
Gee. Well, now that we know all about the perverse constitution of narcissists, can we look at narcissism in a parental context?
Yes, Morana. And this is where we are now going to go into some of the deeper aspects of it. After understanding the various characteristics that people have identified in people, what are the harmful effects of narcissistic parenting on children? And I know for a few weeks there were people that were asking some questions about how to deal with such people that may be narcissistic in their way of parenting. And many of us are parents, and we need to know the harmful effects of this type of parenting on children. The child is invisible and their words fall on deaf ears. To a narcissistic parent, a child is invisible and their words fall on deaf ears. Whatever a child will say, it falls on deaf ears. The child's feelings are invalidated and their reality is rejected. These are some of the ways by which narcissist parents deal with children. The child is like an appliance used upon a parental whim, and the child is not looked at as a human with their own emotional world. The child's self worth is contingent upon what they do to please the parent and not valued for who they are on or their own unique personalities. We must understand that each child and each individual, each human has their own unique personality. Now, the style of parenting, sometimes narcissistic style of parenting, and we will understand that as we go along, creates self doubt in a child. It creates an inability to recognize personal feelings, or even a child begins to mistrust himself. The child is indoctrinated with the notion that their appearance to the public, a child's appearance to the public, is far more important than their own satisfaction and fulfillment. And we find beautiful examples of Rasulullah sallallahu
Sallallahu
alaihi
Alaihi Wasallam.
wasallam parenting style. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam validated children's emotions. Example: when there was a new fruit in a season that came, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to, when it was presented to Rasulullah, he used to take that piece, the fruit, and if there was a child in his presence, he would give that child first that fruit. He validated, he observed the feelings of the child. Now, today we will, if a child comes and we will say, no, it's for the guest. You know, we need to learn these beautiful ways by which we parent our children. A child could be fearful of the real self and could adopt a false self. And that is because self image is the be all and end all to the narcissistic parent. And this takes precedence over just being genuine and authentic. So many a times, parent wants to show off their children as trophies, and the child's sense of real self will be impeded from development, and the child's emotional development will be disrupted, damaged. A child's emotional tank will be running on empty, and they won't even feel loved. The child will be highly distrustful of others and maybe even become paranoid about what people are thinking about me. It's the way we deal with our children that don't do this, what people will say.
Mm.
So, as parents, we need to validate children's emotions. The child, by a narcissistic parent, will be exploited, and the child will be constantly manipulated. And the child will always have to look after the parent instead of the other way around. Parents are supposed to be looking after children, but the child will always be looking up to the parent. Am I not causing any, dishonor to my parent? The child will feel hated. A child will feel rejected. A child feels criticized. A child feels judged instead of feeling loved, valued, encouraged, and accepted. And all attempts by the child to seek attention, approval, affection will become futile. The child will feel he can never measure up, or the child will always, I'm never good enough. There will be no healthy emotional connections for the child to emulate, to follow. And the concept of boundaries in the relationships will be unknown to the child. And such, it's prone to becoming codependent, catering to the needs of others at the expense of their own self. The child does not learn healthy self love. The narcissistic parent will instill into the child the concept of external validation over internal validation. Now, I know these things that I'm saying might sounding a bit, high-ended, but let's continue unpacking it.
Mm.
The narcissistic parent's envy means that any accomplishment by the child that outshines the parent is going to, the parent wants to destroy that. Self credit is an alien concept to the child, as the narcissistic parent constantly hijacking the success of children. The child does not receive parental love. So the notion of someone loving them in adulthood seems like something far fetched. If my parents can't love me, then what chance do I stand with others? And they will have low self worth and they will feel unworthy. The child will have poor self esteem. And sometimes these types of parents place immense pressure, and the child will always be under this pressure, and it will make them, they want to make them perfectionists, high flyers. The child will have to make amends in adulthood, whereby they undo the toxic effects of parental narcissism and maybe even take the measures to recover from the traumatic experiences. Marana, you have any comments, any things, or you want us to continue?
Now, we just got a comment from Sister Zainab from Binoni. She's saying that this is my status today. I'm never raising my children with a mentality of what will people say. It's what will Allah say all day, every day.
Subhanallah. So let's just look at the narcissistic script, Marana, of a narcissistic parent. We gave a script of toxic people.
Are we coming to what are the red flags that you're going to find in a narcissistic parent?
Yes. A narcissistic parent's parenting style is one where they feel entitled to prescribe how the child should live their own life, where they will ultimately make all the decisions for them. The role that parent designates for the child is what the child must adapt to, regardless of their own biological constitution, their own natural dispositions, their own temperamental nature, their own personality types, their own unique gifts that Allah Ta'ala has given them, their own desires and passions. Narcissistic parents hate happiness. One of the best deeds in Islam is to bring happiness to a fellow believer and to dispel their sadness, and more so to bring happiness in your home, to bring happiness to your children, to bring happiness to your partner. The narcissistic parent has other ideas. They abuse their power differential by doing all they can to inflict misery and distress on those that they control. And the innocent child ends up thinking that they are to be blamed for external conditions changing, that everything was good. Suddenly I did something and the whole mood has changed in the home. And we need to understand that children are sometimes too young to process what a fully grown adult can be, that messed up, where they have an aversion to joy. So much destroy any happiness. What happens with many children is that they form a negative association with happiness then. Since their narcissistic parent always punishes them whenever they experience a good, happy way, they try to prevent themselves from developing happy feelings. And there is always a huge price to pay for feeling good. Now, you spoke about the red flags, Morana. Let's look at some of the red flags. The first one is lack of empathy. We spoke of empathy in the beginning. Lack of empathy. Narcissistic parents want to feel special. If you enter a family gathering where your relatives start applauding and playfully cheering for you to show their love for you, it is natural to enjoy that warm reception. But the problem comes when you expect that type of welcome from everyone, including strangers, and feel let down when they fail to make you feel special. So narcissistic parents are control freaks. And you can see this, this habitual control. It's like a disease. When it comes to matters to do with even what the child must like, what the child must eat, where everything has to align with certain orders, Often the rules of a narcissistic parent are so random and useless, but the narcissistic parent will just always want to enforce them. And narcissistic parents don't respect boundaries. Now, this might cause some eyebrows to be raised. Children get affected the most when narcissistic parents' intrusiveness inundates them. There is aspects of privacy. Yes, there is aspects of control. We need to be observant. There is a nice way of saying remote observance. But sometimes they become conditioned to the oppression whereby they don't develop a healthy sense of their self. And they just come, that nothing belongs to them, even their own essence, because the true owner is the parent. And yes, the hadith says that what you and whatever you have belongs to your parent, your father. But there must be some boundaries that we set for some form of independence for our children, especially when they are grown up. And some parents will even answer on behalf of their children. They just don't like to give their children the space. Narcissistic parents are also self-entitled. They hate children's independence. And this is a hallmark of narcissistic parenting, is perceiving the child's independence as a major threat, where the child must be stopped immediately whenever they display any promising signs of self-governance. The parent will do what it takes to deny their child healthy selfhood, separate, fulfilling life. Their lack of empathy, compounded with their immorality, means that they simply don't care about the harm that they cause. And I'll give you a beautiful example to simplify what I'm saying. Sometimes you may tell your child and give him a certain instruction that do this, and the child may stand up and say, no, I don't want to do it this way. I want to do it this way. Many a times, many parents regard this as disrespect and rude. And at times, or most of the times, it may be. However, we need to understand that Allah Ta'ala, in His wisdom, has created in each one of us a sense of self-worth. And there is a need for that to develop in the child. So when we sometimes tell a child something, especially when the child is growing up, the child is expressing his own sentiments and emotions in your presence. Instead of running him down at that moment, here is a beautiful opportunity for you to manage that outburst of the child so that his spirits are not dampened, but rather help him to navigate that, because that child tomorrow is going to be out of your home. He is going to meet with other friends. When they meet with friends, they need to be standing up for their rights. And when they do that, that is their way of learning to become dependent. And this is a way that we as parents should be able to understand and navigate and manage and assist them in how to stand up for themselves instead of just running them down. Now, these are some of the things that we need to try and learn. Yes, Mara.
See, as Ma was mentioning that, sometimes when you tell a child to do something, and he says, no, I don't want to do it that way, I want to do it another way. Sometimes, the way that they do it, we didn't see it, and it might be even easier than the way that we thought.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So sometimes, we need to actually listen to what the child is actually saying. A few comments that have come in. Assalamu alaikum, Jazakallah for the most informative program. A narcissist has no empathy whatsoever. Your pain is their power. And then another one, narcissists like to be in complete control and can't tolerate if it's kids. If kids don't allow them to do it, they can't show their children love. They don't want the kids to succeed in anything they do. That's the comments that we have so far.
Yes, I want to just talk about one more thing, Mona, before we end for today's program. Some of the red flags. Narcissistic parents envy their children. Now, this is so abnormal. Narcissistic parents will be extremely envious, jealous of their child's talents that don't bring in the narcissistic supply. Someone is saying how somehow the grandparents seem to get involved. How do you deal with narcissistic grandparents? The way you deal with parents is the same way about the grandparents. But we will discuss that inshallah. Another area where this extreme envy manifests itself is in the dimension of marriage. The narcissistic parent has two options for the child's love life. Either they take their son or daughter-in-law as a trophy, as if they are the ones married to them, or feel threatened by their son, daughter-in-law's impressiveness. Hence, they criticize, compete, and crush the marriage out of being green with envy. The line of reasoning by the parent is that my child can't have something superior. So either I appropriate its privileges or I obliterate it, I finish it up. At other times, the parent may rationalize their destructive measures as no one being up to the standards of their child. So all they are doing is protecting them from bad influences. That's what they say. But in reality, they don't want anyone else dominating or sharing their child, or they are highly envious of the sheer quality of the child's spouse, male or female, husband or wife. And many children of narcissists have end up unmarried, even though many decent prospectives came along. And this is something that we need to keep in mind regarding narcissistic parenting. I've just mentioned some of the red lights or red flags. Inshallah, Maulana, will conclude here today. I want to discuss some other aspects if you want, if there is time, and or we can go into it next week. And that is exploring the cause of mental health disorders in Islam. So we've discussed all these disorders. Very briefly, we spoke about narcissists, we spoke about codependence, we spoke about empaths, we spoke about supernova empaths. We also spoke about narcissistic parenting and how harmful it is. It's now time that this is where it's going to really get interesting, how everything can be simply and clearly explained from an Islamic perspective. And that's where we are going to go to now, exploring the causes of these mental health disorders through the Islamic lens, inshallah. What we did up till now was just more on the health psychologists' perspectives of these disorders. And inshallah, we'll now discuss the Islamic perspective from next week, inshallah. If Allah gives us the ability, inshallah. Again, just as there may be things that we might have said that might not be correct. If there is anything that needs correction, please feel free to talk to us directly. We acknowledge that we don't know everything and we can make mistakes. However, let's be civil about how we rectify whatever we say that is incorrect here.
Sure. Well, just before we go, there's a few messages that just come in. The one is that another trait is that a narcissist will always feel entitled for everyone, including little children. And this example has been given that, you know, when an adult is sitting, then it's always the entitlement that people must come and make salam to them, whether it be children or adults, and they won't go in that extra mile and make salam first. Another is Assalamu alaikum. May I please have this talk? It's a brilliant talk. Inshallah, we will put out the podcast very soon. Another one that has come about, how do you deal with a narcissistic workaholic parent? Inshallah, that we will discuss as time goes by.
Inshallah.
Ma, Jazakallah for your time. Much appreciated. Inshallah, we'll speak to Maran again next week, Wednesday.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi